Hello, Ms. Pullman. Thank you for being here today and for collaborating with the Next Gen Lead program. I'm quickly going to introduce myself before I ask you to introduce yourself. So my name is Lara Arth. I'm from Vienna. I'm currently studying at the Business of Economics, Vienna University of Business and Economics. I'm also part of Oikos Vienna, and I'm part of the project Curriculum Transformation that is aiming to bring into teaching more sustainable topics. And I'm very happy and excited to have you here today. And thank you for being here again. Can you just tell us a bit about what you are doing and about your profession?
Thank you, Laura, for inviting me here today. I'm Professor Mellie Pullman. I'm from Portland State University, but I'm currently visiting in Groningen in the Netherlands. I teach supply chain management, particularly topics related to sustainability, and food and beverages are my specialty. I've written a number of cases for Oikos, mostly to do with, I guess, food and beverages and sustainability issues there. And most of those cases have won awards. And I work a lot with local companies, small producers. Right now I'm looking at fisheries and social enterprises. So a lot of things in sustainability are important, and it's always hard to choose what to work on.
Sounds perfect and very exciting. And so we have talked about that you want to share a personal story with us today. Could you share this with us?
Sure. So I looked at all the topics I could talk about, and I guess probably one of the most important things is looking at my career and the choices I've made around what kind of work I wanted to do and how that aligned with my values. So this kind of combines self-awareness with being true to your values. What happened to me is that when I went to university, I wanted to study alternative energy and solar design. So I spent many years doing that. In fact, I went right into a master's program studying solar design. And when I finished, the government in the US had changed from being pro alternative energy to being not for alternative energy. And I had spent all this money and time in school to become a solar designer and energy systems person. So I had to take whatever job I could find. Unfortunately, the only jobs in my area were for defense contractors. And so I took my first engineering job for a company that made guidance systems for missiles and bombs. And so that was a choice, since I couldn't find anything else in the area and I had a lot of student debt to pay back. I took this job, and I spent a number of years there, 3 years. And during that time, I was suffering the whole time, thinking I'm not really being true to my values. So, but, the money was very good, and it was a secure job, which, people like that, especially, and it wasn't a good economy in the US at the time. And towards the end, I found a business plan on a table at a party, essentially, for a craft brewery. And I asked the person who had done the business plan who they were going to have run the brewery. And the guy said, I don't know, I'll find someone. And I said, I'll do this. All I had was a background in making beer at home. And I had a good job, but I decided, to work for a small business in my community and to make a handcrafted product is more in line with my values. And so even if I'm jumping off the cliff into something that may not pay me a salary for, who knows, a year or more, I think it's better to stay in my community and make a handcrafted product and work in a small business. So much to the surprise of all the managers of my company, I left and went to start this brewery. And I'd have to say that everyone working there that were my peers were incredibly envious because they felt trapped and they couldn't leave. But I left and lived a very simple life, starting this new business. and we grew really quickly, but it took at least a year before we actually could pay ourselves anything. So the whole financial
Mm-hmm.
security part was like thrown out the window. And I worked did this brewery for a number of years as a partner. And then I realized, my business partner and I don't really see the world in the same way. I wanted the employees to all have a sense of ownership and to be paid well, and to keep them employed for a long time. And he was really just about making money. So I realized again, my compass needed to go back to the place that my values. So I had to make a change. So I left and went to school for business because I thought that business would give me a lot more choices in terms of what I could do. And in fact, I quickly learned that being an educator was probably a better path because you could use business to make positive change in the world. So I left the brewery and I went to business school, and then I ended up getting my PhD. But that didn't solve all the problems because still, whatever school you go to, you still have to find the school that aligns with your values. So often I would get recruited by a big prestigious school, say in the US or in the UK, and I'd think, well, that would be a good place to go. And I would go to that school, and I quickly realize, oh, there's issues here where they're not really interested in sustainability. They're not really interested in improving social issues in society. And they cater to an elite student base, perhaps, not trying to bring people from underprivileged backgrounds up to a fairer level in society. So I would have to go then and find a school that was more in line with my values. And that took me quite a number of years to actually find the perfect place, which was Portland State, which had a sustainability mission. And their goal is to basically accept anyone that wants to go to university. And we have students that are in prison, and we educate, online into the prison system. We have students that are the first person in their family to go to school. There's people that are single parents that are trying to go to school. Sometimes they need to bring their baby to the classroom. So, but you realize that, you're actually making a huge difference in those people's lives. And so I've ended up staying there because I realized I found the perfect match of the values that I want to support in the world through education. And not every school shares those values. In fact, increasingly, even our school tends to shift into more like, oh, we need to serve the tech market. And, sort of forgetting about the fact that there are a lot of other social enterprises, nonprofits, other really interesting organizations that need sustainability skills and some business skills to kind of complement those so they can keep their nonprofit afloat. So I've constantly, I feel like in my career, I've been trying to get back in line with my values when sometimes we all get off course and then we have to make a correction. So.
What an inspiring story. I found that really great. And I think sometimes, or your example is that sometimes you could get, maybe there are some reasons that you lose track a bit. Maybe it's financially or something like that. But I was wondering, because you were mentioning that, so you worked for this missile company, in order to start somehow your career, maybe, and I was wondering, do you think it might be easier to find sustainable enterprises or companies now, like maybe it was like in earlier years, now that is like sustainability is such a big topic already, and or how do you see that?
Well, I think that you can find big organizations that now have more of a sustainability focus. One of the things that I found is that I tend to like smaller organizations. And if you spend your time in school doing internships and things like that, where you can actually try some smaller organizations, because they all really need students to help them, You can often find a good, if I had done that, it was a little difficult because I was engineering. So, but if I was in another field, I could have gone as an intern and then tested out some other organizations to see if they were my kind of place. I mean, if people have to come to terms with how much money they actually think they need in life and also the environment that they might want to work in. So a lot of the smaller companies, they may not pay as well, but you get to learn a lot more because you tend to have to wear a lot of hats. So I think that's probably in retrospect, if I had worked for very small companies, but I didn't see a role for myself when I finished my engineering degree with those kind of tiny companies. But there were other places I probably could have, I probably could have gone to some company that did some kind of energy analysis work if I'd looked hard enough. So I think sometimes it requires a little more work, and it's not just the companies that come to the school to recruit, right? Sometimes those are the big players that might be less interesting.
Do you think like smaller companies can live today easier with their sustainability topic? So they have like an advantage in market. So because there is a consumer or consumption, there are consumers that want to buy exactly those products. Was that a clear question?
Well, I mean, they have some advantages because they might be in a local market where they can get their voice out locally. I think that the much bigger companies have bigger budgets, right, for getting their message across. And even though they say they might be doing sustainable things, sometimes it's greenwashing. So with the smaller companies, you have a chance to really figure out what they're doing because they're usually in your community. So, I mean, I've spent a lot of time in Portland, and a lot of the cases that I've done are about smaller companies, companies that probably have no more than 150 people as their employees. And, when you can usually, as a community member, figure out what they're doing, right? That they're not greenwashing because they're in your backyard. Yeah. But some other bigger company, some big multinational, you may see their messaging, but it's easier to question that because you can't really figure out what they're doing.
And how was it in your craft beer business? So that was a quite small business, I guess. And how many people?
Well, it grew to be quite big.
Oh, okay.
So, not big like AB InBev or Heineken, no. But it grew to be a much bigger. It was the biggest craft brewery in that state. Oh. But it was the first one there, right? So it eventually merged with another local brewery, and they became like the biggest entity there. So I think that I wasn't there the whole time, but I've stayed involved with the industry for years and seen that there's a lot of social and environmental activism in the craft brewery world around the world. You probably have seen it in your community, that there are people doing very, very good things for the environment, trying to push a great sustainability agenda. Some of them are doing social enterprise type of thing where they're actually giving part of their profits to very specific, not NGOs or nonprofits. So it's getting to be, I'd say it's one of those industries that has a lot of companies doing amazing things.
I saw like a lot of this art craft, and that is a thing now. But I never realized that it's like a lot social business cases behind there. So what was your the social aspect of your project back then?
Oh, the project that I recently worked on?
Or the recent one.
I think there's a project in Barcelona that we've recently done on social enterprises. It's a restaurant that integrates undocumented workers and migrants into the local hospitality. They train them and integrate them. So I work on projects like that now, but there's also some breweries doing that. And I've been writing about them, that they're actually training prisoners and how to, while people are in prison, they train them how to make beer. There's also some people doing it with coffee too, but then when they place them in brewery jobs when they get out of prison. So there's a lot of interesting activism going on there, with social programs, particularly, I'd say, mostly looking at people who are incarcerated.
And they're only based in Barcelona, or are there other?
There's one in Italy, there's Barcelona, there's in the US, it's harder to do that kind of thing just because of the US prison system. But in Europe, there's a fair amount of activity, coffee roasters in London that are doing training within that. They create a facility within the prison system and train people. And then they have a job when they come out. So I write a lot about that kind of thing since I know the brewery world well, and I know that coffee is kind of similar. It's another craft product.
Yeah.
So, and you can also get a lot more the customers can learn about it very quickly and in these local communities and support that activity. So I find in particular in Europe, there's a lot of support for these kind of social enterprises related to food and beverages that are have a social mission.
Super interesting. Thank you again for sharing the whole story and for answering my questions. So to end, I want you to ask to maybe line out a bit the key message you want to tell us about your story.
Well, I guess I would end by saying it's very important to know your personal values and also to be self-aware of when you put yourself in a situation that's not in line with your social values, how you're going to reconcile the two. For me, sometimes by being in a weird place, like working for a place that made guidance systems for missiles, is that you actually can find some redeeming things there. Like with the employees that I worked with, there were people very different from me, and I learned a lot from those people. And then a lot of them came and helped me when I started my brewery. They came and welded and made things, and we developed this unique bond. And I think that it really helped me to constantly remember this may not be the thing I think is right, but at the end of the day, I'll get out of it and something good will come of it, right? So I think that I influenced people. I sort of became a folk hero for the whole factory. They had pictures of me up around the factory in the defense contract, which I thought was hilarious. But it sort of showed them that they didn't necessarily have to continue in that kind of business. And it also, I had learned that I have to constantly bring myself back to what's important in life. And being aware of, like, you got off track, what's it going to take to get back on track?
Very inspiring. And maybe like for us to share again a practice that you want to tell us, a practice that you would recommend for helping people to learn maybe the competency. Now it's maybe self-awareness or getting back on track, but maybe another competency that you want to share.
Yeah, I think, because I'm in education, what I would ask students to do when they do a project with a company is to, like, after you do a term project with a company, is to sit and reflect on what actually was learned there. And, can you imagine yourself working in a place like that? And is that in line with your value system? That's kind of like writing a diary or a journal. It's just to get yourself, like, looking at a place and saying, is what is happening in that place something that I would want to support? Or if I was working there, how could I potentially change that organization? So just a way to, like, critically think about it, looking at yourself, but also looking at, if you were in the position of changing that kind of organization, what could you do? just
Mhm.
just a creative exercise.
Super, perfect. So then I would like to thank you again for sharing all this with us. I think it was super interesting and also for me personally, super inspiring.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're welcome.
Please feel free to contact us anytime if you have any questions. As soon as this will be online, we will contact you.
Great. Well, thank you, Laura.
Thank you again.